Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. So the physicist Michael guy has made a video, and with a stupid title, claims versus evidence. Conventional physics is so low on evidence, right? I mean, I've pointed out they didn't redo the Eddington experiment. They haven't done any of these lever, catapult, any energy experiments. They haven't done any energy experiments. They really haven't ever measured the actual joules that a bullet creates and the actual joules that a gun recoil creates. They've never done any of these experiments. And then they're going to talk about evidence versus claims. I mean, it's just so ironically, ironic. Anyway, so we'll play the video. I will load it and see. I don't think there'll be a commercial. Alright, see how she goes. Yes, the exciting intro.
Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. In this
I probably need a little more volume. Probably.
video, I want to talk about the difference between claims and evidence.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just bizarre, right? I mean, they have no evidence really for relativity, no direct evidence, right? And you could just argue that, so you can't break an atomic clock, right? So the only thing special about relativity is it came about at a time where they invented atomic clocks. And basically the claim is somehow atomic clocks can't be broken like all the other physical clocks that can be broken by just changing their physical circumstance. When, of course, it's known that atomic clocks can easily be broken. I just put more radioactive material closer together and I changed the half-life of the material. It's just a fact. So it's just this is just such bullshit. They don't have any evidence. Conventional physics is riding on no evidence. They've never proven a photon is a wave. They've never done any of this crap. They've never proven that electrons are waving. They've never shown us a real antiparticle ever. They don't have any explanation for where all the positrons are hiding. I mean, it's just too ridiculous for one of these fake physicists to talk about how people should have evidence when they don't have any.
And potentially use this as a jumping off point for probably a number of other topics related to epistemology. Now, epistemology is the branch of philosophy related to knowledge.
So this is just such bullshit, okay? I mean, science is already a discipline. You don't need to contextualize it into any other category. It's by its own definition, okay, this investigation. It's detective work. That's what science is. You look at something and you diagnose how it works. What happened? Who did it? I mean, it's really that simple.
What it is, whether a belief that someone holds is justified, and what methods can be used.
Yeah, so what methods do we use? What's the definition of reasonable doubt? And my accusation would be is your hypocrisy and duplicity about how you apply reasonable doubt just makes you useless as jurors at trial. You're not fair cops. You're not fair arbiters of the truth. You're religious fanatics just defending your own preference fable.
To strengthen that justification.
And you do it in this corrupt manner where, this guy has overtly corrupted a physical experiment. He's cheated. He had a simple task, do a lever experiment, convert the energy from one object into another object. And he's a physicist, and we're supposed to believe he didn't know that a piece of clay would absorb energy and take the energy out of the system. He's a physicist, and he didn't know that.
Now, full disclosure, I am not a philosopher.
No, you're a religious fanatic. You're a zealot for a fable, a silly pile of nonsense that you've become a mullah. You've become a bishop, okay, in a silly religion. And all you're doing is duping kids. You're just fucking warping people's understanding by preaching a bunch of nonsense, well-practiced verses. Say your little prayers, Mother, Holy, force times distance, you know, blah, blah, blah.
But science is all about building models.
Yeah, it's building models. You don't have a model that's rational. It's a completely irrational model. You can't draw a picture of your frickin' model. You can't even draw a picture of an atom now. Where are all the antiparticles hiding?
That accurately reflect reality, as demonstrated by their ability to predict the outcome of.
So, yeah, so it's all about predicting, not showing. So, and again, predicting outcomes when you're saying, oh, well, I threw it up in the air and I predicted it'll come back down again. Well, that's not much of a prediction, frankly. We all can do that.
Future experiments and observations. The practice of science is all about using tests to evaluate.
So where have you done this? Again, in 350 years, you've been claiming it takes 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast. And have you tried to prove it? No. No. 400 times better visual resolution from space. Have you ever redone the 100-year-old Eddington experiment? No. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence that you've done any investigating, looking for experiments to see if it's possible. Could he have murdered a person by sticking the knife in their throat? Well, let me see if I can stick a knife in something. You know, I could try a watermelon, and I could see if I could do it. You haven't done any of that. None.
Whether a model holds up to scrutiny, whether that model has evidential justification.
So they're just statements about the reality, okay? You don't need a whole model. You're just making an argument. Push versus pull. So I could just make the argument. Is there any elemental way you can form a pull? Can an elemental object pull on something?
So my thoughts on this topic come from that kind of a practical application perspective.
Yeah, you propagandizing putz.
So,
liar, cheater, thief, bullshitter.
Again, I'm not a philosopher, so
yes, you're not an honorable, decent person with any kind of integrity either. You're a shit talker on the internet.
Take that all with a grain of salt. So,
a doctor of shit talk.
Part of this is getting towards the idea of what methods do we use to evaluate claims. So,
cheat. Distort the lens all you can. Shove a blob of clay in front of the cart. That'll do it. That'll make it work so much better.
Let's make sure that we define all of our terms, since some of these words are used differently in different kinds of contexts.
Yeah, cheater, crook, liar, bum, creep, asshole. Pretty simple.
When I'm talking about a claim, it's a statement that something is true about some subject.
Right. Okay. It's an elemental physical universe made out of physical things that have to actually interact using physical things. They can't interact using ESP or spidey sense. There is no spidey sense in the real universe. Jesus. Yeah. Whoa. What a bold claim that is. Really challenging you. Fuck.
It's currently raining outside. I have $10 million.
Oh, let me speed this up. I'll go insane. The drivel.
In my bank account. If object A applies a force to object B, then object B also applies a force to object A.
Oh, well, see, that's just the silly part, right? If you give somebody $10, there's no counter force that makes you poorer. You got poorer by giving away the $10, so there's no counter force.
A of equal magnitude but opposite direction. All of these claims could be true, or some of these claims could be not true.
All right, and you haven't done any experiments. That's the real truth, okay? The fact is, in 350 years of these theories about the function of energy in the universe, you have done no experiments.
So again, claim
you haven't even tried to drive something, put a scale sideways and see how much energy it takes for the object to weigh its mass. You haven't even tried that simple experiment.
It's just a statement that something is true about some subject. Now, belief, at least in the context that I'm using it, is the assessment that some claim about the world is true or likely true. This does not.
Belief is just being convinced, okay? And you should be convinced by evidence. You shouldn't be convinced by propaganda or he says so or any of that crap. You should be convinced because you can logically follow along. You can see it. You can watch it happen. That should be convincing you. Evidence should convince you, not just talk about, oh yeah, we've proven lots of times that it takes 4 times the energy to go twice as fast. Yeah, we proved it all over the place, when they haven't proved it at all. They have no example of it.
Mean absolute certainty. We can have tentative beliefs that are our current best understandings that are.
Yes, and again, everything they state about reality is just junk. They won't show you.
Are also subject to revision when we're presented with new data. This is not saying that our beliefs can't or shouldn't change when presented with additional data.
Right, and you didn't fix, so we know that they got plus and minus wrong. And they never fixed it, because to fix it, they have to redo all of Maxwell's equations. And they don't want to have to do that, because then they lose their right-hand rule crap. They lose all kinds of stuff that they have to rethink and refigure. But, yeah, they should have fixed it.
So, for example, when I drive my car, I believe that the brakes will work.
So why don't you talk about your car and about how much gas it takes to go a certain velocity, and then you can explain how if I want to go from 10 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour, I have to use 16 times the fuel.
I'm convinced that they are working properly. If I wasn't convinced that they were working properly, I'd probably take my car in to get it checked. And this belief is based on the previous performance, the last time I drove the car.
Boring.
And even with that previous performance, I still test out the.
So who is this video for? I mean, he's explaining how to be, like, not irrational. So why don't you just talk about non-contradiction or something and just say, oh, you really shouldn't say the water's wet and then say the water's dry, because that's a contradiction. Those two statements can't both be right, so it's kind of stupid. So don't do that. Oh, brother.
Brakes, if I'm starting to drive a little bit, backing out of some parking lot or starting to drive, you test the brakes a little bit to make sure that they're still working. And if you start hearing noises with the brakes, you are getting new information, well, then you reevaluate that.
So you could just make the point, if you have some sort of technical knowledge, you know that there's a 14-cent piece of metal that's actually on the brake pad itself, and it'll make a noise when the brake pads have gotten too thin and the rivets are starting to show. It'll make a little squeal noise. And so you can hear the little squeal noise and you'll know, hey, I've got to change my brakes. I gotta get new brakes. So you can know the truth, that's how it works. Or you can just be an idiot and say, gee, my brakes are squeaking. They should stop doing that.
Belief, and maybe take it into an expert who can run additional tests to identify potential problems. Again, none of this requires absolute certainty, but when we have a belief on some kind of topic, an assessment that some claim is true, we have at least enough confidence that we're able to make.
What is he talking about? I mean, how is this analogy even connected to anything? Why don't you talk about being fooled? That's what it's really about. It's just being fooled. You draw a conclusion too soon. So Leibniz believed that it take the same energy to move 4 pounds 1 foot as it took to move 1 pound 4 feet. Just isn't true. Just isn't. You lift them at the same speed, it's going to be twice as much work to lift the 4 pounds as it is to lift the 1 pound 4 feet.
Informed decisions, even though we don't have absolute certainty. Now, it is important to recognize that we can hold beliefs for good reasons and we can hold beliefs for bad reasons.
Right, and your reasons are all bad and your attitude is all bad and it's all corrupt and it's all evil. It's all anti-science. Because you know you don't have evidence and you won't admit it. You know they should have done the Eddington experiment from space, right? There's no logical reason not to do it. It's insanely cheap, insanely fast. It should be done. No doubt about it. Should have been done. Should have been attempted. It's crazy that it wasn't. You should be able to say those words. You should say it's crazy that they haven't tested this, gas to, how fast you go, and that they haven't crashed a car into a wall to see if going faster means it does 4 times or 8 times or 16 times the damage. That all I do is increase the velocity, and I can get quadratic increases in the damage I cause. You think they could have done that experiment. That isn't that complicated. Making something go twice as fast isn't that hard to do. So they did clay experiments in the 1740s. I have asked him, I've pleaded with him, please. I did a 5-minute video on the subject. Explain what I said in that 5-minute video is incorrect. That you really can't find out how much energy something has by denting it with round objects. That's not the way you find out the actual energy. I talked about rolling distance on a surface, and the fact is that, yes, something can roll 4 times as far, but it didn't put 4 times the energy into the ground. It didn't do 4 times the work. Just a fact. Now, these are all facts that I've pleaded with you to fucking pay some attention to and point out how I'm wrong and your physics is right. That these are valid experiments. That denting clay with round objects is a valid test. Rolling something on a surface is a valid test. Measuring how far it rolls will tell you how much energy it has. That's a value test. I've challenged you and you've run away from the challenge, plain and simple. Because you're a criminal, you're a crook, you're a propagandist, you're a phony and a fraud. Defending your own personal fables, not defending science.
So, kind of our goal in this is to say, I want to develop...
It's just disgusting that he's making a video about this very subject of being fair to the facts when they are so unfair to the facts. So incapable of admitting they really should have evidence. They really should have done the lever experiment. They should do the catapult experiment. They should do these experiments to demonstrate their fable to be true. The pool ball experiment. Crash 2 pool balls into another pool ball. They all weigh the same mass. Crash 2 of them into one. Put all the energy in the one. Does it go twice as fast? Well, the fact is it will. And the fact is, by your theory, you just made free energy. Free kinetic energy. You conserve the momentum, but you made free kinetic energy.
Develop some kind of methodology for assessing which claims are true or likely true, and which claims are false or likely false. And both of those elements are important. We want both sides of this to be as accurate as possible. Because our beliefs, the claims about the world that we accept as true, those beliefs affect how we act. And those actions...
So it's just weird that you obviously somewhere you were corrupted. You had lousy parents who didn't teach you to have integrity and honesty. Because again, it's obvious you don't have physical evidence for all of these claims. I mean, 90% of the claims physics makes, it can't show you the experiment. Say, see how it works? You don't have it. Because there's contradictions in the experiment. You know that all I have to do is put it on a pool table or put it on a lever or do it in a catapult or do it in some other object, and I'm not going to get the same result. And it's not going to duplicate that experiment. And you're just such frauds. Not to admit that your evidence is way below what it should be for your confidence. Your level of confidence is way ahead of the cart.
Have consequences. So we want our internal...
way ahead of the horses. Sorry. You've put your confidence cart way ahead of your evidence horses.
Model of reality to match the external world as accurately as possible. If we were to set our bar for accepting a claim, like how much evidence we require to accept that claim, if we were to set that...
So, obviously, you have set the bar at below 0, okay? You don't really have any evidence, right? You got nothing for most of these claims. You have absolutely nothing. You have nothing. Anti-frickin' particles? Nothing.
Bar too low, we believe everything, potentially even things that are contradictory. And then when we run into a situation...
Yeah, take a break. Oh, annoying putts. All right. So this is like it's parallels. Like I said, this is really about court conduct. And this guy is just a Johnny Cochran. He'll just find any kind of maneuver, little poems, little bullshit, find some way to evade facing the truth, which is the evidence isn't on your side. And it's just a fact. The odds aren't in your favor. Yeah.
Where those different beliefs are in conflict with each other, we don't necessarily have a way to move forward. If we set the bar for even tentative conditional acceptance of a claim to be...
So what is all this? Again, he's talking about how you should decide a case, okay? So he's telling the jury, well, you have to weigh the evidence. And of course, we provide a lot of evidence and they provide no evidence, so you should just believe us. And that's how it should work. And what is this crap? How is he going to reclamate this in terms of any one of these subjects pointing out how they have overwhelmed us with physical experimental evidence when we're totally underwhelmed by that evidence?
Too high, then we'd believe absolutely nothing, and we'd be kind of stuck in a state of nihilistic inaction. For example, if I needed a ridiculously high bar of evidence to even tentatively accept that my brakes are going to work while I'm driving, I'd never drive anywhere. We perform a test, maybe as we're starting to drive, just test the brake.
Yeah, it is safer. So yeah, prevention is really a great idea. Yeah, just try it. Don't make a mess. You don't got a mess to clean up.
Brakes a little bit, make sure everything's working, and then, okay, that is our tentative conclusion until we start getting new data and hearing, oh, the brakes might not be working as well. So again, we need this method, some kind of set of methods for assessing which claims are true or likely true, and which claims are false or likely false.
All right, so if the other guys, when you make the claim that they don't have evidence, they won't even admit that they don't have evidence, that should scare you. That's so bad. But, these people are even worse, that even if you get them to admit there's no evidence, they're still going to argue, well, it's not our job. It's your job. You're supposed to make the evidence. We don't have to make evidence for our theory. You have to make evidence of your theory. You have to prove God doesn't exist. So they just play the typical religious game. We have to disprove we have to prove the non-existence of their fable.
And this is kind of the heart of what skepticism is. Skepticism, at least for the purposes of this discussion, again, there are different definitions, is the idea that belief in a claim should be withheld until sufficient evidence is presented. And even after that evidence is presented...
Yeah, that whole reasonable doubt standard. What is wrong with a reasonable doubt standard, right? So you're just basically saying, is there some reason to doubt physics when it claims something? And the point would be is, of course, there's reason to doubt. This is not conviction evidence. They don't have fingerprints. They don't have the gun. They didn't even bother going to the crime scene to collect the evidence. So they didn't bother doing the Eddington experiment again from space with the 400 times better resolution, indicating, gee, they're really not even interested in getting the right answer, are they? They just couldn't care less. They didn't even balance something on a lever. They didn't catapult things. They didn't do any experiments. Again, they never even tested to see if the bullet has 2,000 joules of energy and the gun recoil only has 2. They didn't even test it.
Our beliefs should still be tentative and subject to revision given new, better information. Okay. Also, when I say that belief in a claim should be withheld until sufficient evidence is presented, that doesn't mean that we should accept the negation of that claim. For example, if someone claims that it's raining outside, and maybe I don't trust them enough to just take them at their word for this pretty mundane fact, but if someone says that it's raining outside and they don't present evidence, that doesn't mean I'm justified in saying it's not raining outside.
Oh, right. So that's just too silly, frankly. There's absolutely no reason to give any latitude to somebody say, a dragon ate my homework. There's absolutely no reason to pay any attention to a fable that's on its face provably a fable. A story made up. My dog ate the homework. That kind of crap. So there's every good reason. It is reasonable to completely annihilate that source and just say that is non-evidence, and it might even be anti-evidence. It actually might be a piece of evidence that they're up to something. If they won't even admit that their evidence is weak, that implies that they are willing to lie. And that you now can't trust anything else they say because they've already shown themselves to be liars. Because they can't admit something that's obviously true. They can't say the words, yes, I wish NASA would have done the 5-minute, $14 Eddington experiment from space. They can't say the words, and by not saying those words, they've proven themselves to be dishonest communicators. They obviously can't communicate to you anything honestly because they can't admit the obvious that, well, I sure wish science would have crashed some cars and, measured how much heat was created by the crash to prove this, 4 times the speed, 16 times the heat. They should have proven that by now.
Side. I would have to be in a state where I'm just simply saying, I don't know whether it's raining outside. You haven't presented any evidence to support that claim. So we want to make sure that any claims that we accept, we want those to be...
I mean, this is so preachy and bullshitty. Again, you really, if you have to go all the way back to kindergarten and explain how you should be an honest judge of the evidence, I mean, what the fuck? Oh, I shouldn't believe anything a human being says on face value. I mean, I should require to, I should be able to say, show me now and then. If they're going to tell me something extraordinary, I shouldn't say, show me. I have to have that taught to me that I should say, well, you said a UFO raped you last night. Can you show me some, like, his condom or something? Is there some kind of evidence left over?
Based on evidence. So let's talk about evidence a little bit. Again, we said a claim is a statement that something is true about some subject. Okay? The evidence is the set of data that is consistent with the claim and that we would not expect to be consistent with competing claims.
Right. So whether it's consistent with the claim is even in jeopardy with these people because they'll lie about that. I mean, he crashes something into, he puts a piece of clay on the front of a cart, and then he claims that that's duplicating a hard elastic collision. That's his claim. That, yeah, it's the same difference. Hard elastic and blob of clay on the cart, same difference. And then when the results come out exactly the way his theory predicts they should have, he doesn't video it and doesn't use it as evidence. Even though it came out just the way it's supposed to, he said, no, that's an erroneous error. We won't include that as part of our data. We'll extract that data. Extract it. That's not real data somehow. So even though he did the experiment and it's real data, he's decided to extract the data from our view because somehow it's not relevant, even though it's exactly as he predicted. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. So again, so dishonest. Criminally dishonest, frankly.
So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Let's say I claim that it's currently raining outside. Okay? So the claim is, outside it is raining. It is true that this precipitation, water is falling from the sky right now. To provide evidence for that, I could pull the blinds up, point my camera outside, and we can look and see if there is water falling from the sky. Or I could take a camera outside along with an empty glass.
So this is kind of a poor example because obviously it can be raining very little. Okay, it can be dewing. Okay, is that rain? I know.
And I hold that empty glass out and say, look, the empty glass is filling with water as I hold it out there. Both of those observations would be consistent with the claim that it...
So again, this is just more baby talk. We all kind of know that if you were sitting and trying a case, you were sitting there watching a murder trial, you know that you want more than enough evidence. You don't want barely enough evidence or a bare indication. The day after his death, the wife went to a party. Okay, it's one little piece of circumstantial evidence, but you wouldn't convict on that. Come on, you need a little bit more than that. Maybe she didn't like the guy. Didn't care that he was dead. So that didn't mean she killed him. Come on, we can all figure that out. You want more evidence, not less evidence. You don't want meager evidence. You don't want marginal evidence. You want demonstrative evidence. You want overwhelming amount of evidence. You want the fingerprints and the DNA and a videotape.
It is raining outside, Ed would not likely be consistent with the competing claim that it is clear outside. And those pieces of evidence would probably be enough to convince someone that, yes, it likely is raining outside. Maybe I'm tricking you, maybe I've got someone on the roof of the building.
All right, so obviously wave particle isn't going to be decided by evidence that can be collected in a glass, okay? So you're not going to do that. Kinetic energy, on the other hand, is, okay? Frankly, it is something you can do numerous experiments to prove it decisively. It's really not that hard to figure out how much fuel you're pouring into a gas tank. I mean, that's easy to figure out how much fuel it used to go with speed. That's easy to calculate, to figure out. And the damage thing in the same respects, and that Joule invented a system for actually converting all energy into heat. So you can have any energy movement, and you can use that movement to create heat. You can do the work in one place and create an amount of heat that's commensurate, that basically a thermometer. It's a thermometer, and you're going to measure how much energy it was. Why not apply that science? I mean, they named the unit of energy after Joule, and they're not even using Joule's methodology to do the experiment.
With a hose or a sprinkler that's spraying water down, but again, it's reasonably convincing evidence, especially for a claim as mundane as it's raining outside. But let's look at another example, because we have this idea that the data should be consistent with the claim and not expected to be consistent with competing claims. So for example, let's imagine that there was a hit and run incident, and someone claimed that I was the perpetrator.
So again, this is more kind of bullshit, right? Because we know that there can be a pile of evidence that can seem a way. Okay, so we could use the wave particle thing. You have some experiment says particle, another experiment says wave. And you're trying to compile this evidence. So we know it happens in trials, where somebody just happens to look exactly like a criminal, the guy who did it. And witnesses say, yeah, that's the guy. I saw him, so that's him. And it's just unfortunate. It's by appearances, it's a big piece of evidence. In reality, it's no evidence. So I could go back to 1740, the issue that this guy, this lying piece of crap, this slandering, lying, doxing, supporting jackass won't address. And that is the 1740 experiment where you drop round things and dent clay with it. It looks like, impressive, but it isn't. I roll something with twice the velocity and it rolls 4 times as far. It looks 4 times as far. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot more motion. 4 times further it rolls. Yeah, that's a lot. It looks like it, but physics knows it isn't. So if they did the physics, if they actually thought about it, they actually measured it, they'd figure out that, no, when you're going fast, you're making less contact with the ground. Gravity's pushing you per foot. There's less pressure on the ground per foot. You're losing less energy to the ground per foot. Fact. So, yes, it has twice the velocity. It only has twice the energy. It only pushed on the ground twice as much. It looks like it's 4, but it's only 2. Something falls 4 times the distance in gravity. It looks impressive 4 times, but then you find out, it's only twice the velocity. It's only twice the amount of time. It only took twice the time to fall. And it's only weighs twice as much. Come on.
Of this hit.
So this guy is going to tell us about being fooled by being a sucker, by not poking at the evidence a little bit. He's guilty of all these crimes. The last person who should be giving advice.
Run incident. With the fact that I own a car, the evidence that I was the perpetrator in this hit and run? Not really. My having access to a car is consistent with the claim because the perpetrator of the hit and run should have access to the car, but so do most other people. Most people have access to a car. So the competing claim that I was not involved this piece of evidence, the fact that I have access to a car, is consistent with those competing claims. We would have to say, well, what type of car was it? What was the make and model and color of the car? If that matches the car that I have access to, well, that significantly narrows down the number of people that would have access to that specific kind of car, the kind of car that was involved in the hit and run. But I haven't even said where this took place. Maybe this hit and run took place in a completely different country.
A different planet. Yeah, well, I couldn't drive my car to the other planet, could I? So I guess I'm exonerated.
So we'd need more evidence to say, oh, I was also near the location. Maybe we have cell phone tracking data that shows that, oh, my cell phone was right there, moving quickly at the same time as the accident happened. Those would be more pieces of data that are consistent with the claim that I was the perpetrator in this, that we would not expect to be consistent with the competing claims of, if I'm not the perpetrator, it seems a very large coincidence that I would be driving that kind of...
Right, but the fact might be, like with the rolling distance or with the denting clay, the fact might be that you reported your cell phone stolen 5 hours before the hit and run. Yeah.
Car at that time, at that location. Again, that would be a much stronger piece of evidence if it's not consistent with those competing claims. Okay. And there's actually a mathematical method, and we'll probably make at least one video on this, called Bayes' theorem, that gives a quantitative method.
Oh, fuck. Can you imagine? Oh, there's a mathematical method to figure out reasonable doubt. Yeah, sure there is.
Of actually evaluating how strong a piece of evidence is by comparing how likely was that piece of data, given the claim is true, compared to how likely is that piece of data if we assume that the claim is false. Again, that's not exactly Bayes' theorem, but we'll do that in a separate video. Again, it's a method of evaluating how strong a piece of evidence is. Okay. And to quote...
So how strong is the Eddington experiment? So you apply your theory to the Eddington experiment, where the guy writes in his own journal, I wouldn't stake my life on these results, and he admits he's only got 10% of the data he was hoping for. Very difficult experiment to do with 100% perfect data. Impossible, frankly, to do with 10% of that data.
David Hume, a wise person proportions their belief to the evidence. So if we have multiple pieces of data that are both consistent with the claim and that we would not expect to be consistent with competing claims...
Right. Multiple in what? You did the same exact experiment 15,000 times under the same kind of rickety conditions, okay, where you're basically using experimental devices created for the very purpose of creating this demonstration. But you've done none of the other 999,000 available experiments that would test for the same feature. So it's like saying you got a fingerprint, but you didn't do anything else. No DNA, no videos, no, nothing. It's just not good science.
Well, if all those pieces of data point towards this claim, then it's extremely unlikely that all those pieces of data would have been wrong by just...
So again, it's not all these pieces of data, right? So again, in the case of mv squared, 1/2 mv squared, the fact is Leibniz was wrong, okay? If 4 pounds 1 foot isn't the same as 1 pound 4 feet, okay? De Châtelet was wrong, okay? Denting clay isn't a good way to measure energy. All right, rolling things is wrong. It doesn't measure energy. So in every case, every one of these pieces of data are corrupt. And the fact is you don't have any real data.
Coincidence or anything like that. So that would be a large amount of evidence, and we would have a strong confidence that this claim is true. Again, not absolute confidence, but
no, it's all nonsense, right? So even the 10-ton train and the 5-ton train, right? So they have a 5-ton train, they add 10 tons to it, they automatically, because of the formula, have to lose half the energy. And they make the excuse, well, it deformed stuff, and it heated stuff, and it made sparks, and it made sound. All those things have to be made out of momentum. You can't make a sound, you can't make sparks, you can't make pieces fly off unless you use something's momentum. Something has to give the $10 for the $10 to go somewhere. The $10 can't travel in the economy and stay in your pocket. So the fact is, something's momentum had to be used to make sound. Something's momentum had to be used to send a particle flying through space. Something's momentum had to be used to make a spark. All of those things have to take from the thing's momentum. So the very idea that you conserve 100% of the momentum and you lose half the energy, on its face is absolute nonsense. And this jackass defends it. This jackass, this fucking moron, this fucking illogical idiot. He runs away from the simple challenge to explain that's not duplicity. That's not absolute duplicitous evidence. You cannot argue that something lost half its energy and yet it has the same momentum. It's not possible.
Much higher level of confidence. If we only have a few pieces of data that are generally consistent with the claim and are not super likely to happen by mistake, well, we might only have a little bit of confidence that that claim is true. You know, maybe just a tentative acceptance, like I think this is true, but I'm not entirely sure.
Well, this doesn't have anything to do with physics. This has to do with just people having integrity. So here's a guy who has no integrity when it comes to fairly describing a piece of evidence. He's totally distorted in his perspective. Any evidence supporting his theory is heavy and weighty and important. Any evidence supporting some alternative explanation is ignored and pretended it doesn't exist. Such a phony.
And if we only have like maybe one or two pieces of data that are not all that consistent with the claim, but not, and also could be just a fluke or a mistake, then we might not have any confidence at all and just say, again, go back to that skepticism idea of saying, I'm going to withhold accepting this claim, withhold belief in that claim, until more evidence is presented.
So he distorted a simple experiment, a lever, converted it into some angular momentum experiment, and then did it in the context of he's doing distinctly different things, inelastic versus elastic. And then he says, all I have to do is get somewhere in that range, and I've proven wave particle. I mean, it's basically wave particle, and he's saying anything in between wave and particle means particle. Or anything in between wave and particle means wave. I mean, it was that ludicrous. He didn't even get right answers. He didn't get answers actually consistent with his theory, right on the money. No, they were answers way off the money, but because they were somewhere in between wave and particle, therefore it's particle. I mean, it's that bad.
So, kind of expanding off of this, when someone makes a positive claim, saying X is the case, you know, it's raining outside, I have 10...
It's a push-averse. It's a push-averse. It's a push-averse. It's a push-averse. Show me one piece of evidence indicating it's not a push-averse. Show me something. Show me something that's a pull. That's a real pull. That can't be explained as being an inverted push. Show me.
$1 million in my bank account, making some kind of claim. If they want anyone else to take that claim seriously, they adopt a burden of proof. They are required to provide the evidence.
Oh, amazing. Just amazing. So this guy's going to talk about burden of proof for all the wacky crap, this entanglement crap, okay, when they don't even know what a beam splitter is, you know, in terms of what its actual function is. They sit there and lie to you and say, look, we have a beam splitter. It creates two equal beams. Well, they're really not equal. It doesn't sit there and say, well, I'll randomly pick a photon and I'll randomly pick a photon to go left. No, it's not random at all. It's a very specific difference. One photon bounces off the surface. The other photon goes through a complex surface full of slit experiments, frankly. Yeah. Very different streams of photons. They're not the same stream. They're not all, you know, I don't know, white, black. You know, they're not all short, tall. They haven't been, you know, they're not all, you know, just randomly this, you know, an average height. You really have filtered them. You really have sent tall ones this way and short ones that way. It's a filter. It's not a beam splitter. It's a beam filter. You know, and they can't even get that right. I mean, you know, physics is so frickin' dumb. All right, take another break. Oh, God, I hate this. I mean, there's so many subjects. You just say, see what they did. They said the universe is expanding because of redshift. And they're basically arguing that somehow There's only one possible explanation for redshift. There's only one possible explanation. We're moving away and the object's moving away. There's no other way the light could possibly have its frequency degraded. Yeah. Can't happen any other possible way. I mean, this is their physics. There's so little evidence, and here he is talking about critically thinking and critically evaluating evidence, and they've done such a poor job of it. Everything looks like they don't give a damn about analyzing anything. He just looks guilty. That's all they're doing. He's sitting in the courtroom, and they're looking at his face and saying he has a guilty face. That's their physics.
If they want to convince you, they have to provide the evidence that should be sufficient to convince a reasonable person. And this burden of proof...
So this definition of reasonable person is the whole argument, right? I mean, obviously the jurors in the OJ trial weren't reasonable or fair. They obviously had agendas, writing books and being, a civil rights defender or something. The truth didn't matter to those people. And the argument is what matters here in this conversation. Now, we know the audience is full of a bunch of assholes who just they just want people to say what they want to hear, and they don't want to hear what they don't want to hear. But the scientists themselves should be way above that, and they're demonstrating, no, they're even worse than the viewers. The mullahs are worse than the followers.
Lies whether the claim is that X is true or that X is not true. Both of those would have a burden of proof. If I say it's raining outside, I adopt the burden of proof. I have to demonstrate that it's raining outside. If I say it is not raining outside, I also adopt the burden of proof. I would have to show you that it is not raining outside. And again, this burden of proof applies for anyone making a claim. And
I mean, how obvious can you get? And yes, all claims, you have to make a claim, you have to provide the facts and the logic to go with it. And the point I'm making here clearly is obviously that's not what they're providing you, is facts and logic. They're showing you a gimmick. They're denting clay, and then they're rolling something on a surface and not telling you that, the friction isn't linear. So obviously, I'm losing a lot less energy the faster I'm going. They're just not saying that. They're not just giving you a clue to be able to get the right answer. They're just taking advantage of what deception can do. They're just deceiving you.
And if you want someone to take that claim seriously, you have to provide the evidence to back it up. So let's look at a case in some detail. Suppose I make the claim that I have $10 million in my bank account.
Oh, why do you keep this? So why bother with analogies? Why don't you just get to something real? I mean, this is just get to a real physical claim. You're making the claim that particles are entangled. And what's your proof? Well, I have this bizarre experiment with 17 mirrors and 43 lenses, and I can prove that somehow the photons know each other and they have the same genetics or something. Or whatever. Some kind of bullshit.
The fact that I'm making this claim could be considered as part of the evidence. I'm telling you that I have $10 million in my bank account. But this is exceptionally weak evidence. We know that people can be mistaken. We know that people can intentionally lie. And those would be competing claims. And if those competing claims are true, I'm lying or I'm mistaken, you might still expect me to say that I have $10 million in my bank account. That goes back to this idea that evidence should be consistent with the claim and not consistent with competing claims. And the idea that
Well, whatever, all this again, duh. So what does this have to do with anything? So Bohr was obviously kind of a religious kook who didn't think the universe was actually material. Just a fact. He thought it was just made out of wooicles, all kinds of woo. And so what claim could he make about how anything functions that I should take seriously when his foundational understanding of the universe wasn't three-dimensional and real? Obviously, none of his claims could I take on face value. They'd have to come with substantial evidence.
I'm just mistaken or intentionally lying. Both of those are competing claims. So again, me saying that I have $10 million in my bank account, me making that claim could constitute evidence, but
Yes, you claiming you did a fair evaluation of a lever in converting energy would be a lie and a falsehood, and that the experiment, the way you performed it, could be reasonably derived as a piece of data or evidence when it was useless because of the conditions under which you did the experiment.
Just personal eyewitness testimony, things like that, are exceptionally weak evidence. So, what might count as better evidence? Well, I could present you with a printed out bank statement that says, oh, I have this much money in my bank account. It is possible that I could fake that.
I mean, it's just so boring. I mean, so this is a third analogy. Who cares? Yes, we all know everybody's going to have their own definition of a reasonable doubt, and you can judge a person's integrity based on how silly that definition is. So, I mean, obviously, all the God botherers think they don't even have to bother with any of that. They don't have to evaluate any evidence or any of that kind of crap, because it's all faith. And the accusation is well, physics is looking like it has the same wacky standard. Just have it suggested by the right person. If Richard Feynman says so, God does play dice with the universe. He said it. You don't like it? Tough. That's his response. Okay, so he's saying it is a random verse. Who's randomizing it? Who knows? The magical randomizer.
That, but it is less likely. It takes a little bit more effort to fake a bank statement, and that would narrow down the possibility that I'm just mistaken. If I'm mistaken, I'm probably not presenting a bank statement saying that I have this much money in my account.
Look, the obvious point is more evidence the better. And the obvious accusation against standard physics is they go with the least evidence possible to get away with the claim. They don't corroborate it by finding lots of different ways to prove it. They don't do any of that analysis. And they certainly don't provide multiple experiments from multiple angles to try to glean these truths. They just keep saying, well, the double slit proves it, or some stupid statement like that. Redshift is redshift. It only happens one way.
I could give you a notarized letter from the bank saying how much money is in my account. That would be significantly harder to fake. Or I could invite you to come to the bank with me and get the information directly from a teller. All of these would be stronger and stronger pieces of evidence that I have $10 million in my bank account.
Right, so why haven't you done the simple experiment to prove that it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, or 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast, or 25 times the fuel to go 5 times as fast, or 36 times the fuel to go 6 times as fast? Why haven't you proven any of that? Why don't you show me that statement?
What if, instead of presenting bank statements or bringing you to the bank and having you talk to the teller and having them confirm what's in my bank account, instead of doing that, imagine I said that I have $10 million in my bank account because I just sold my mansion for $10 million. Would that constitute evidence? No. That would simply be another claim with no more backing than the original claim about...
So why don't you use a real example? So say something that you claim to be true. Okay, that there's Wu particles and they're entangled. And then show me how you provided me all kinds of evidence proving it to be true.
My bank account. Unless there were some other kind of data to back up this second claim, unless you already knew that I had lived in a mansion before and knew that it was up for sale, or I could present a bill of sale or something like that, this second claim wouldn't move us any closer to being convinced of the first claim. If separate evidence that I had owned a mansion were presented, then that would be supporting evidence for both of those claims about my bank account, since I now have evidence for a plausible source of money, but it's the evidence that should drive our confidence of the claim, not just more claims. The main point here is making a...
You're a duplicitous, evil, lying sack of shit to make any of this claim as if your physics has followed these rules. That it has given a motherfucking shit about providing actual physical evidence for any of the crap it claims. The evidence sucks.
Additional claims does not constitute evidence. Every additional claim I make would need to also be demonstrated with its own set of evidence. So just making more claims doesn't add anything to my case. It's the evidence, the data, the confirmable data that is consistent with the claim and not consistent with competing claims.
Right. Twice the time, twice the velocity, twice the weight. You say it's 4 times the energy. Yeah. No. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 4.
That's what should determine how confident we are as to whether this claim is true, false, or we just don't have enough data to identify this. A good quote that kind of highlights some of these points are a quote from the late Christopher Hitchens: "What can be asserted without evidence, or claimed without evidence equivalently, what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence." If I claim that I have...
And the idea of what it constitutes evidence. So again, it doesn't really make much sense to say there's a huge distinction between saying Old Faithful squirts 50,000 gallons of water per eruption. Now, that could be true. Now, if I say Bugs Bunny is pushing the water out of Old Faithful, I mean, obviously these two claims are completely different on their face, in the sense that you can understand one has a plausible hope of being true, and one is discardable as overt nonsense. Okay, it's a fable, it's a story, it's fake on its face. All right. So there's a difference between, you can tell the difference between a lie, okay, and an honest attempt at the truth. Those two things are different.
$10 million in the bank. And someone else claims, no, you don't have $10 million in the bank. Unless one of us actually provides any actual evidence, both of those claims are on equal footing, so we can dismiss both of those claims equally. Again, not accepting their negation. Not saying, oh, I know you don't have $10 million in the bank account. Simply saying, if all your...
Again, it doesn't... to deny the existence of plausibility. So if somebody who I know is the spawn of some rich guy says it, then it's going to be more plausible. I would be a fool to negate it with the same passion that I negate the opposite claim. Because we do have a piece of evidence in the person who's making the claim.
They're giving me his claims. There's no way for me to evaluate. There's no evidence for me to look at to evaluate whether those claims are true or likely true, or false or likely false. It's the data that is important, not additional claims. As an example of this, directly from my channel, I have some recent videos where I went through a...
This guy is such a liar. He uses the word data for an experiment. And they do these limited niche experiments. They don't do the obvious one that would prove the case. So they don't actually measure the energy that actually something produces and see how much energy it actually produced, how many bowling pins it knocked down. They don't do the actual experiment. They just give you a calculation and say, that's our prediction. And see, it looks like it. That's it. It looks like more energy. So therefore, it must be more energy. I mean, it's so trivial. So now he's going to do an example from his channel. This ought to be funny. Look, it says right here, lever launcher example. He's going to use that as an example. This fake, phony fraud experiment he did. I mean, I can't believe he's going to double down on his lie experiment. I mean, he's lying to you as an audience. I'm just saying he's an overt liar to sit there and say he didn't know that clay absorbs energy. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. He's going to duplicate a hard elastic collision by putting a blob of clay in front of the cart. Nobody on earth could believe a physicist could be that stupid. So he has to be that dishonest. There's no other explanation. He's a physicist. He does know that clay absorbs energy. He does know that hard and the word clay don't go together at all. You can't do hard elastic with a blob of clay.
Lever launcher experiment to demonstrate the concept of conservation of angular momentum. The setup involved having a horizontal lever where I launched one object at the lever, it hit the end of one end of the lever, and that caused it to rotate, launching another object. And
so big lie right from the start, right? Because he didn't do that experiment. He used clay and a spring. Both experiments were completely destroyed the function of the lever. The whole point of the lever is that it does convert the difference in the speed. The spring destroys the speed. It tells that it gives the object can't tell how fast the thing is moving when you put a spring underneath it. If I put a spring on your hand and then I apply a very fast force or I apply a very heavy slow force, you won't be able to tell the difference, because the spring converts them both into just force on your hand.
I went through what happens when we change the masses, what happens when we change where those objects are located.
What a liar. I mean, it's just disgusting that he gets away with this lying on the internet.
And in a previous video, I had gone through my predictions,
And he was wrong about his predictions. First he said levers won't oscillate. Yes, they will. If you hang them from the top, they will oscillate perfectly. Then he said you're going to get half the energy. If I put energy in here, only half of it will come out here and the other half will bounce off. That wasn't true either. What a liar.
Standard kind of physics textbook concepts.
There's nothing standard physics concept. It's not in the textbook. A lever is not in the textbook on the subject of momentum versus kinetic energy. It's not in the textbook because the textbook can't deal with the fact that the lever kind of proves kinetic energy is nonsense.
Test should happen to this lever. Again, highlighting the importance of conservation of angular momentum for those systems.
Just a lie that this angular momentum has anything to do with the subject. You're talking about an amount of energy in and an amount of energy out. It's a simple fucking experiment. That's all you want to know is how much energy did I put in, how much energy did I get out. I mean, this lie that this has to do with angular momentum is just a dodge, because he's not really talking about angular momentum. He's talking about rotational dynamics. How much does it rotate? How much it rotates. This 5 mass out here rotates the same angle as this. They both go 30, they both go 30. The difference is when this one's doing the 30, it's doing it at twice the velocity. So he's just playing word games here to pretend that he's talking about some sort of real momentum. No, the real momentum is exactly the same as what the lever predicts. Half the mass, twice the distance is going to go twice the velocity, and it's going to have it's going to have the same momentum as the full mass going half the velocity. That's the truth. And he's just lying.
And then giving us kind of a range on what should happen in the elastic case when it's
This lie about anybody would do the inelastic case. There's no such thing as an inelastic lever experiment that could make any sense. I'm going to drop jello on one side of the lever and watch it go blah all over the place. And that's going to be a valid conversion of the energy. I'm going to drop jello on one side and I'm going to watch the jello on the other side do absolutely nothing. And that's going to be proof that levers don't work. They don't conserve momentum because I dropped jello on it. Who would do an inelastic collision on a lever? It doesn't even make any sense on its face. It's retarded. The whole function of the lever is for it to be as elastic as possible. You want your work on one side of the lever to be completely converted into action on the other side of the lever. You don't want anything to steal it. You don't want anything rubbery. You don't want anything in the way.
Bouncy objects hitting the lever, or what would happen in the inelastic case if we have things like clay and it's going to absorb more of the energy?
Oh, amazing that he would say this shit when he put it right on the front of the cart. Stole all the energy from the object coming in by having a big blob of clay to absorb all the energy. Amazing.
So, kind of giving us the key.
So the key argument made was don't do that experiment. I made it clear to him in the live conversation. I said it over and over again. You don't want inelastic. You don't want mush. You don't want any of this crap. It's the last thing you want to do in this experiment. I made it totally clear over and over again. So for this liar to say that somehow the lever experiment was supposed to be some sort of mush experiment, we're just going to see if we can dent things with a lever.
Concepts and what is the range of outcomes that we would expect. If I would have just left it at, here's what classical physics says should happen to the lever. Therefore, classical physics is correct. you would rightly reject that claim because it's missing the necessary supporting evidence, which is why I actually did the work.
Oh, amazing. He's going to say that his experiment is a valid demonstration of the function of a lever. And he did it in two ways. A spring, which defeats the lever, and clay, which defeats the lever. I mean, amazing liar. How can he get away with this? This is propaganda. This is grotesque distortion of the truth. This is so far from a reasonable explanation of what took place. It's so far from the goddamn truth. What a dishonest, lying sack of shit as a human being.
And went through the experiment, showed full details on how I set up the experiment.
What a fuck you. Full details. You didn't show us the experiment with the hard object, the screw mounted to the front of the cart. You didn't show us that experiment.
How I took the data, the different cases, analyzing the data.
Yes, and the different cases where you made free momentum, indicating one of your timers might be a little bit off because you really can't make free momentum. Newsflash.
And actually demonstrating that for this kind of lever...
What a liar, that this was a demonstration of anything but how crooks succeed. That's it. Crime pays. He's doing a crime against the truth, a crime against science. This is exactly what you don't want people to be doing. Faking experiments, distorting, hyperbole, exaggeration. The experiment was a pile of shit because he didn't understand it from the very beginning. And he kept putting obstacles in the way of the lever doing its basic function, which is to convert a deceleration on one side into an acceleration on the other side. That's the function of the lever. That's how it creates mechanical advantage. He destroyed its capacity to create mechanical advantage.
System. The important quantity is the conservation of angular momentum.
Oh, so again, he keeps saying this is such bullshit. I mean, I've already made the point. This lying asshole says, if I make two wheels, okay, there's identical wheels. And on one wheel, I put a 5 mass on the outside. And the other wheel, I put a 10 mass, half the distance. Okay, the radius. So 10 mass here, 5 mass here. This will, in fact, move twice as fast. This will move 1 velocity. And the fact is, the two wheels, this wheel spun, and this wheel spun, will spin exactly the same.
And then after that, depending on the springiness of the impacting object...
Because it's just a lever. The angular momentum is just a lever. The lever in this position, lever in this position. It doesn't matter what position I put it in. The fact of the matter is the thing on the outside is going to move twice the speed of the thing on the inside. Fact.
Whether they're hitting with a spring or hitting with clay.
So again, hitting with spring or hitting with clay, why would I do either one of those? Both of them defeat the innate function of the lever. Again, the lever wants the energy to be instantaneous as possible. Get it from one side to the other side as quickly as possible. That's all its function is. That's the ideal lever. He went as far away from an ideal lever as you can get. I mean, short of putting Jell-O on the lever, he is as far away from the function of the lever as you can get.
Those should be at different points in the range between the completely elastic and completely...
So this is more bullshit. Why should an experiment that's completely elastic be in any range? It should be a very specific outcome. And that was my prediction, which came substantially true. So when we put a 5 mass at the one location and a 5 mass at the same distance and just tried to create the outcome, it didn't come out as his prediction. It didn't come out with this half thing, okay? And it came out with 90% conversion of the energy. You took the energy from one side and you convert it to the other side, exactly as I predicted.
Inelastic cases. But again, we need the data. If I want my claim to be taken seriously...
No, you need data that has some hope of being connected to the truth and some sort of honest attempt to find the truth. You basically cracked the magnifying glass. You broke this experiment in every way you could possibly find to create a distorted lens. You did everything you could to break the experiment.
I need to show the data that actually demonstrates the claim and hopefully makes a convincing case.
And convincing to who? A fanatic. Somebody who wants to believe in Mohammed. But that's all it'll work on. Anybody else, any other reasonable judge should say, yes, this is really bad science. I mean, really, you took a simple concept, conversion. You want to take the energy from one side and convert it to the other side, and you're going to mess with springs and clay? Why would I do that if I want the conversion to happen?
Now, another quote that you may have heard of before relating to claims and evidence is the quote from Carl Sagan, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." When a claim is presented...
So we no, and that's not even true. They require at least ordinary evidence. So you should at least have ordinary evidence if you're going to make an extraordinary claim. Give me at least ordinary. You don't need extraordinary evidence, right? You say you were visited by a UFO. Okay, extraordinary claim. Well, just show me the rock he left behind. Or show me the footprint his spaceship left. Show me some kind of ordinary evidence. And yeah, well, okay, I'll probably believe it. You don't need extraordinary evidence. You just need evidence, period. So Carl Sagan wasn't exactly right.
Listen to us.
It's not a very good quote, okay? It sounds really nice because it's poetic, but it really doesn't add up when you really think about it. Extraordinary claims need evidence. The more evidence, the better, but it just needs evidence.
We have in our minds a set of previously established beliefs, ideally beliefs based on strong evidence, and these may or may not...
Whatever that even means. No, beliefs built on religion and faith and trust and a bunch of crap. You went to a little university and they filled your head full of a bunch of wooey crap and you became a Borgite for that crap. That crappy, stupid, moronic interpretation of reality.
Comport with the new claim. If a claim includes aspects that either lack prior evidence or have, worse off, contradictory prior evidence.
So, big lie there. You're the one with the problem with contradiction, okay? I mean, momentum is right in the middle of your kinetic energy. So you're always going to be stuck with a huge problem of, well, how can I conserve momentum and make free kinetic energy or destroy kinetic energy? It's always going to be a problem. Anytime you convert energy from a mass that is different, you're going to have an energy problem.
Then, before we're likely to accept this new claim, we need to have extra evidence in support of each of those individual components.
Well, we already did this individual bullshit thing. You need evidence. The more, the better. And your physics is basically of the idea that the least you can get away with is just fine.
And explain what might have been wrong with any contradictory evidence that we've previously seen. For example, suppose I said...
Again, the contradictory evidence, the example he should give is, well, why didn't you do the simple experiment? Right? I mean, you're at trial and the guy shows you the gun and then you ask the question, well, did you take fingerprints off the gun? And they say no. I mean, that's sort of evidence that, well, why didn't you fingerprint the gun? I mean, it's kind of a common sense thing to do. And they'll say, well, because we're trying to convict this guy and the fingerprints aren't going to match that guy, so we don't want to do that experiment. They're evading the experiment, right? You got to say they're evading the Eddington experiment, right? You can't say they're not evading it. They're evading doing it from space because it doesn't work. The fact is, it doesn't work. And they already know that, and that's why they're not doing it. It's because it doesn't work.
This morning, I drove my car to work. Well, you probably already accept that cars exist, people drive them, people go to work, and often people's jobs start in the morning.
So look, NASA knows kinetic energy doesn't move spaceships. It knows it's useless. You can say the bullet has 2,000 joules, but NASA knows, now whatever the joules are, the bullet and the recoiling gun have the same amount of it. Okay, they have the same thermodynamic capacity to pressurize the universe. They are the same weight. Okay, one bullet, one atom moving 1,000 miles an hour is the same as 1,000 atoms moving 1 mile an hour. There isn't 1,000 times difference in their energy. The one atom doesn't have 1,000 times the energy because it's one atom moving 1,000 miles an hour. It's silly, stupid physics. And they already know it. They just won't admit it. I mean, NASA already knows it.
So, in your mind, almost automatically, you can quickly assess that many of the elements of this claim are already accepted. So this is a fairly mundane claim, so you might just take me at my word that I drove my car to work this morning. If instead I said, this morning...
What the fuck is he doing this for? So he sits there for one little tiny piece of the video, he talks about a real experiment, and then he's back to fantasies again. Storytelling. Who cares?
I rode my horse to work. Well, you probably accept that horses exist, but you also know that a much smaller portion of the population own a horse and would ride one to work. You might want to see a picture of me with my horse, and maybe a bit of explanation of where I work and, what some of the,
Picture with him with his horse. Should say moose. Apparently you have a thing for mooses.
What some issues might come up in terms of how do I ride my horse to work, or maybe come by and see the horse. The claim is more unlikely, so more evidence is required to meet all of those claim components. What if I said, this morning, I flew on my pet dragon to my castle in the mountains? Well, you'd need evidence that dragons exist, that I have one, that the dragon is both willing and able to let me ride it, that I have a castle in the...
No, all I need is a videotape, frankly. So if you got the videotape, then I have all of those answers.
Mountains, and that I actually did all of this stuff this morning. Again, there's multiple nested claims.
Right, just show something taking 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast, and now we're done. We don't have to do anything else because that's such a big, hard piece of evidence. But you won't produce the big piece of hard evidence. Instead, you'll produce little niche distorto experiments. Can I distort the outcome? Can I pervert it? Can I swing it one way or the other? Can I cheat? That's it. Shenanigans. That's all you have. Shenanigans. It's shenanaphysics.
Inside of that one claim. And since I'm guessing that you don't currently accept that dragons exist, at least for starters, me showing you a picture of me on my dragon probably wouldn't be convincing enough because, again, pictures can be faked.
Yeah, but you can usually leave artifacts behind, so it's pretty hard to fake them entirely. But I guess now it's, these pictures are all synthetic from their creation. So, yes, a computer can do it.
This is an extraordinary claim, so it would require extraordinary evidence, much stronger evidence. So again, when we...
It really doesn't need stronger evidence. I mean, you just take us to the pile of dragon poo, and okay, and it's got a bunch of dead people in it or something, that'd be pretty good evidence.
Have one of these extraordinary claims that kind of goes against what we've previously got as our set of accepted premises. We'd have to provide additional evidence for those associated claims, and again, to explain any potentially contradictory prior evidence that we have.
So it's hilarious that he doesn't use any real examples of this. So you could use entanglement and say, look at all the evidence we've provided. I mean, we have this convoluted mirror thingy with the and the lenses and the bullshit. Doesn't that convince the hell out of you?
I've seen before. So as an example of this, let's consider an entirely hypothetical example where an entirely fictional person, let's call them Bob Smith, makes a claim.
Why would he do this again? So he's just going to make another hypothetical, another fake analogy, and when he could analogize this to a real physics circumstance. So again, analogize it to the Deschardelet-Clay experiment. So he's claiming it's a valid experiment, it proved the physics honorably, it did physics a great favor, blah, 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 blah. And I'm making the counterclaim that no, it's a piece of shit. It's on its face a piece of shit. It could have been figured out it was a piece of shit. It should have been figured out it was a piece of shit. Physicists should be able to figure out that round things aren't linear. Yeah, a round surface isn't a straight line.
Suppose BS is convinced that the bulk of our collective understanding of physics is wrong. And this fictional person thinks that conservation of energy is entirely made up, and the only thing that matters in every type of...
All right, so this is a lie here, right? So he's lying about me here. Okay, so this is just part of the game playing, right? So instead of saying my name and using it as a real example, I have defended from the very beginning conservation of energy as Galileo, Descartes, and Newton understood it, and as I understand it, which is momentum. And it always has to be conserved. You can never destroy one of these arrows. I've said it over and over again. So I'm a huge defender of conservation of motion in the universe, conservation of matter moving. I'm stating it overtly and saying that, yes, one atom going 1,000 miles an hour is the same motion in the universe. The same amount of universe will be affected as 1,000 atoms moving 1 mile an hour. The same amount of area in the universe will be affected by those two circumstances. Exactly the same. I'm saying that. You're saying differently. You're saying that the one atom going 1,000 miles an hour is affecting 1,000 times more space than the 1,000 atoms going 1 mile an hour. You're saying they cover a different area. You're saying they apply 1,000 times more pressure to the universe. Yeah. And I'm saying you have no evidence. I'm saying spaceships aren't moved by your silly kinetic energy, meaning it doesn't really exist. It's a fable. All right, so now we'll play this again.
Suppose BS is convinced that the bulk of our collective understanding of physics is wrong.
Yeah, the collective understanding that you have destroyed science. Okay, you did it in France in 1735 or whatever. You let a little show convince you of a lie, a pile of crap, a silly idea. And because Newton was dead, okay, you got away with it. And that's the reason why you got away with it. It's because Newton was dead. The last great scientist was dead.
And this fictional person thinks that conservation of energy is entirely made up.
So, big lie, right? So, I mean, I'm defending conservation of total energy. I'm saying when you put 100 into something, you can't get 150 out. That's free momentum. So, unless you explain where the extra 50 came from, okay, you can't do it. And you also can't put 100 in and get 50 out. That can't happen either. I'm clearly saying that. So just understand, he's proving right here, okay, that this isn't about a misunderstanding. This isn't about, just a fact that we disagree about foundational understanding. He's showing he's a liar. He's showing you right overtly that he's willing to lie about somebody else's position. Because I clearly do defend conservation. I'm aggressively defending conservation of motion in the universe. I've pointed out Descartes at least 100 times and pointed out that was Descartes' great insight, that there's a certain amount of motion in the universe and there's never anything added or subtracted, that the universe just runs on the motion already in it, that the motion just moves from one object to another object to another object to another object to another object. It just moves. It changes its position. It never changes its existence. So it's just such a lie to say I'm denying conservation laws. It's a fucking lie. I'm denying that I conserve fake kinetic energy, that there's any obligation to conserve the idea that there's 16 times the force in something going 4 times as fast. I have no obligation to believe that.
And the only thing that matters in every type of system is the magnitude of momentum. Again, contrary to classical physics.
Okay, so again, it's not contrary. So I could play Professor Lewin right here saying nature can deal with kinetic energy one way or the other, but nature can't finagle momentum. I mean, it is not classical physics to say you can destroy momentum. That's not what classical physics, that's not what their textbook says. Destroying momentum, there's not a chapter on destroying momentum.
This is quite the claim, in part because it would require that scientists and engineers in every field from around the world who have demonstrated their collective expertise through their ability to design...
Hilarious. So this is like them saying quantum mechanics is the only reason why we have cell phones. That we never would have figured out what a transistor was if we didn't believe in entanglement. Bullshit. I mean, bullshit. Right? We would have never miniaturized parts without quantum mechanics. It took them 30 years to go from red LEDs to blue LEDs. And it wasn't because of quantum mechanics, right? It's because, no, it's really just trial and error. We improve things by fiddling with them, messing with them. And yes, some theory helps. But this is just such a lie that somehow all of physics is based on this piece of shit. When obviously all the accelerator crap goes out the window. Yes, lots of their silly assumptions about how energy works in the universe is broken. The neutrino disappears tomorrow. Because the only reason why neutrinos exist is because of their silly kinetic energy formula. Because they've exaggerated how much energy the nuclear reaction creates. And that exaggerated number means they have to account for it. They have to give it to something. They got the wrong answers. And they deal with the wrong answer by creating fake crap.
Prototype and manufacture everything from cars to spacecraft to computers to skyscrapers to power plants to chemical engineering to robotics and so on. All of them.
It's just a standard lie that somehow all of that wouldn't have happened. The Wright brothers would have never stepped into an airplane if they didn't believe in quantum mechanics. I mean, it's just such a pile of shit. Absolute shit.
Would all need to either be mistaken or lying about the very basic fundamental.
Well, clearly you're a liar. I mean, clearly you're a distorter. Clearly you're. I mean, how stupid can I believe you are? You think you were fair to the lever. You put a spring on it, and then you put a blob of clay on it, essentially. And then said, I'm going to do a lever experiment. I'm going to show how levers don't work, okay? Because I'm going to put springs and clay on them. I mean, too silly, frankly.
Principles of their fields. Note that this is not an argument from authority. I wouldn't say that everyone must believe the scientific community because they're experts.
I'm saying that, well, yes, I am saying that, because when we lie about all the experiments we've done and how we proved it, and it was nail in the coffin evidence, and everybody knows it's nail in the coffin evidence. I mean, look, there's a fringe pattern. Every time there's a fringe pattern, there must be interference, right? You can't make a fringe pattern without any other interference, right? Well, yeah, you could have a radio signal, right, where you have the antenna, in between. Okay, so this is your antenna here in the middle, and this is your source over here, and your source over here. And yeah, you could send radio signal, and yes, you could create interference fringes. That is, you could move the middle antenna, and you could make the signal go off, on. And yes, these two things obviously aren't interfering with each other. I mean, obviously the little waves coming off of here can't interfere with the waves coming off of here, so obviously that can't happen. But you believe me anyway, right? Even though my experiment proves that it doesn't work, you don't take that seriously, right? I mean, you don't think about the subject at all, right? You don't analyze what we say, right? You don't really want to analyze anything we say. You just want to believe what we say. But it's nail in the coffin evidence. I mean, the radio thing is nail in the coffin evidence. That's definitely... Well, it's definitely not interference. Yeah, well, we're going to say so anyway. Oh, God. What fucking scum.
Citing this as a piece of supporting data from, again, demonstrated experts, demonstrated by...
Oh, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. I mean, all the experiments we can't find on the internet. They haven't even done Newton's cradle experiments. They haven't even, let's glue 3 balls together and see if it makes a difference. They haven't done anything. Oh, fuck.
By their ability to build these technologies that can do all these things.
Oh, yes, and you did it all with your theory. No. So again, we know NASA landed on the moon. So go ahead. You're making the assertion they use kinetic energy theory to decide how much thrust to eject. So go ahead and show me that to be true. Now, we know they testified that they just used Newtonian mechanics to land on the moon. So go ahead, show me that they used Leibnizian mechanics and just didn't realize. They didn't tell us. But they really used Leibnizian mechanics. Fuck you, liar.
Thanks. So, in Bob Smith's claim, where all of these experts are wrong at an incredibly basic, introductory, fundamental level, BS would need to explain how all of these experts could be so wrong.
The Eddington experiment. How many ways do you want me to explain it? You're believing an experiment done 100 years ago that had 10% of the data quality. The guy who did it said, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. And you're saying it's the truth. It's a fact. And you never repeated it successfully from Earth, and you've never even attempted it from 400 times better resolution space. Why the fuck shouldn't I doubt that physics?
Yet still able to make all the technology that we use every day.
Oh, he said it for the 3rd time. The proof that we're right is the fact that you have running water in your house. If without quantum mechanics, you couldn't make plumbing.
But even without that, when any claim is made, evidence is required to support it. So let's continue with this hypothetical. So imagine if, in this hypothetical example, Bob followed up
Get what you fucking deserve, you lying sack of scum.
this claim by saying, if you take that toy where you have a stack of bouncy balls, where the bottom one is the heaviest and they keep getting lighter, when you drop them all, the one at the top ends up being launched very quickly. And I think you might get maybe 4 times more kinetic energy out of the last object than all the total energy you started with.
And where are you going to do the proof? So did you ever measure the experiment? So you have to really do the measurement, right? Because you're just going to make up a story about how much the big ball retains of its momentum. How much it loses will decide whether or not you did create free energy.
And that's it. No demonstration of how fast the objects actually move in this case. No calculations of any kind. Just, I think you'll...
So why is he playing this? I mean, that's a video I did remove from the 5, it's not on the page anymore. So I did remove that argument for that very reason. That, yeah, they haven't done the calculation and I'm not going to bother doing it. I mean, I'm not going to bother trying to find a video and try to do frame rates and all that kind of crap. It's just not worth it. It needs to be done well. And I made this exact point. I made it to him, this exact point. And here he is lying about it.
Violate conservation of energy. This is simply another claim that is entirely unsubstantiated. But
so, insane, right? So of the 12 videos, he picks the one I already removed. Okay, and I already told him, okay, let's just forget that subject until somebody does the measuring. I said these words. I mean, amazing. Amazing. I mean, his lack of integrity has no bounds. But I'm still arguing that, if you do the experiment, I'm just going to argue that it seems kind of obvious, okay, that you have converted the momentum that was in the basketball directly into you've changed 1,000 atoms going 1 mile an hour, and you've taken 30 of those atoms and made them go much faster, and you've created fake, kinetic energy.
imagine our imaginary Bob isn't done yet. He states, if I have a pressurized vessel and a valve with stoppers at 2...
So why the fuck would he do this? I mean, this Bob thing. All right, so this is a response to, he's saying that hydraulics won't prove that momentum wins, kinetic energy fails. Okay, so he has a vessel filled with pressure.
ends, and those stoppers get launched by the pressurized vessel. And then I lock one end in place. The other end will launch at twice the speed, which means it's got more energy than...
Yes, twice the speed of the original one, meaning it has twice the total energy. So the 2 stoppers went out at half the velocity. You had twice the mass at twice the velocity. And you're going to have at half the velocity. And now you're going to have one mass moving the full velocity. That's the same momentum, but it's not the same kinetic energy. The one stopper will have twice the kinetic energy. So how's he going to get around this? I mean, I should draw it. Well, I'll draw it if he keeps talking about it.
In the original case, and that violates conservation of energy. And then he says, gear systems will launch in this way.
Amazing. So he what did he counter it with? So let's just go to the drawing board. He didn't counter the argument with anything. I just can't believe this shit. There's no counter. He didn't make a counter argument. He didn't make a counter argument. I can't believe he's making my argument for me. What's your counter argument? What's your counter theory? You made free kinetic energy. All right, so here's the simple example. We're just going to have the same tube, and we're going to fill it with the same amount of pressure. So we're going to pressurize the tube. You have 2 stoppers. Okay, so in the first experiment, both the stoppers can leave. All right, so this one's going to leave with 1 velocity, we'll say, and this will leave the same mass and 1 velocity. So the mass is the same here, and the mass is the same here. And now, this time, the second time, we're going to do the experiment. Okay, same pressure, and this time this stopper is nailed. Okay, it can't move. So only this one can move. All right, so you have one mass, and now it's going to be going twice the velocity. Right? So it's a simple mathematical circumstance. This 2 gets squared to 4. Okay, all you have is 1 here and 1 here, so obviously you're just going to end up with 2 here. So this creates 2 units of energy. This creates 4 units of energy. Same pressure, okay, and 2 completely different outcomes in terms of how much energy is now in the universe by their definition. Now obviously it's the same momentum, okay, it's just 2 and 2 momentum-wise, no squared velocity. 2, 1 plus 1 equals 2. All right, so momentum is conserved, it works perfectly, it makes perfect sense. Kinetic energy, just make free kinetic energy. And the lighter I make this thing, the more and more kinetic energy I'll make. So if I make it half the mass, then I'll have 4 times the energy. That's their ridiculous theory. So he just said Bob made that suggestion. He didn't counter it with anything. And now he's going to talk about gears, which is again the same argument as the lever argument. And what's his counter going to be? Is he going to counter the argument? Amazing.
And lever systems will work in this way, and Newton's cradles will work in this way, and dropping objects on springs will work in that way, and they'll all violate conservation of energy.
Conservation of momentum, conservation of motion.
But during all this, Bob does no experiments to provide evidence for the...
So that's a lie. So what? I mean, obviously, I told him right from the very start. I made a lever, balanced the objects, did all that. So I have done experiments. But again, why is it my obligation? Aren't these elemental enough experiments that your physics should have already done them? You've had billions of dollars, hundreds of years, millions of scientists, and you haven't done any of these foundational experiments to prove your theories? All you have is the Charolais clay experiments and air cart experiments? That's insanely lame.
These claims. And the few times that videos of other experiments are presented, an accurate analysis actually shows that they go against his claim.
Right, so let's understand. The accurate analysis is Ian Gosling hid the video from you. So you didn't get to see when it comes out exactly my way. He won't show you that video. Then you had Brozo hitting the cue balls. Got the answer of 11 and 19. 11 and 19 is pretty close to 2 to 1, right? Not that far off, within the margin of Brozosian error. So plenty of look, Ian Gosling's got a video, I think it's still up, where he says it's proof. And he couldn't even figure out how to properly calculate 4 times the distance. And he actually dropped the object from 5 times the distance and got the completely wrong answer, called it a proof. I had to point out, oh yeah, well you can't count to 4 right, Brozo. And that's when he did the next experiment that he hid from you. So after he fixed the calculation that was wrong, he decided not to show you the experiment. So when the experiment was done right, he didn't show it. And he's defending that shit. Those shitty, crappy, filthy, dirty, rickety experiments. He's defending that as a foundation for science. Not like me. I'm saying somebody good, some professional should do these experiments. We should have slow motion film. We should have all this shit. This should be done really precisely. Are they arguing for that? No. They're arguing for do the experiment as crappy as possible so you can distort the outcome. Make it really shenanigan able. Make it the more rickety, the more fuck-upable it is so we can shenanigan the experiment. Let's not have them done precisely and empirically. Do them shitty.
In this hypothetical, all Bob has provided are a series of...
So again, what Bob has provided is a counter-argument pointing out how you have no evidence. That volumes of evidence are missing from the evidence table. That you're sitting there saying the guy's guilty and you're talking about a gun, but there's no gun on the table. You're talking about the knife and there's no knife on the table. You're talking about the gloves he wore. There's no gloves on the table.
Claims upon claims. No evidence to back up any of these claims.
Right. You have no evidence. You did a lever experiment where you completely disabled the lever. You might as well have just broken it in half. The experiment was so fundamentally flawed. You cheated the fuck out of it. Fact.
Whatsoever, and actually some evidence that refutes it.
Actually some evidence that refutes it. And that evidence is what? Oh, let's count the frame rates on an oscillating ball where we can only see one frame of the video. We're only going to use one frame out of the video to detect how fast it's going. Oh yeah, that's a standard technique. Yeah, sure it is. You're gonna have a cancer treatment based on science that rickety and shitty. I mean, that's what that would be real justice, is that these people go to the hospital and the shitty Brozosian physics that they're defending would be the basis for their medical treatment.
Coupled with the fact that a key underlying premise of BS's claims, that it's the magnitude of momentum that's our important quantity.
Yeah, that's Professor Lewin basically said it. Nature can't finagle momentum.
Has been repeatedly disconfirmed by multiple independent...
All right, so just disconfirmed by multiple... See, he keeps saying it. Multiple independent, no fucking goddamn pour gasoline, no turning the electric motor up, no putting more water into the water turbine, no water wheels spinning faster, no physical evidence whatsoever. No spaceships turned. I mean, nothing. No physical evidence to speak of except some rickety experiment where they bang an object into another object and pretend to measure its velocity. And again, he did that experiment, and he has two experiments, right? Same spring compression. He puts two heavy things on this side of the spring, and he gets a certain amount of momentum out. Then he puts light things in front of the spring, and he gets a certain amount out. Guess what? He gets half as much the lighter he goes. So somehow pushing light things, you lose half the energy of the spring. Believable? I don't think so.
Experiments. Given all of this, that we just have claims and contradictory evidence that goes against the claim.
So just understand, he's lied. He lied about the lever. He lied about what I've said. He lies about what I've argued. So just understand, this is all coming from a compulsive now liar. He's clearly compulsive about lying.
How seriously should we take BS's nested stack of claims?
You should take them as claims, and then you should say, well, what's my counter argument? So here you could have explained your counter argument, right? I gave you the opportunity. Here's the simple experiment. What's so complicated? The gear experiment. I gave you the simple analysis. Your only obligation, it doesn't seem like much of an obligation, is for you to explain where the extra energy came from. I mean, how exactly did the same pressure being relieved in the same manner pretty much create twice as much energy here as an outcome than here? I mean, all we have is the recoil of this mechanism and this. That's all there is. There's nothing else, right? And if I make this so it can't recoil, well, then all you have is this. I mean, that would be another good experiment, right? We could tie strings to this thing, could watch how much it moves this way and how much that degrades the velocity this way. Will it go the same speed? If I have a brick wall here, so now it can only shoot this way. Does the cork go faster, or does it go slower if I let this thing move? So if I put it on strings and I allow this thing to move, does this come out slower? These are all experiments that should have been done 100 years ago. Right? There's no reason why physics didn't already calculate all this by doing the experiments and prove it. Why didn't they prove any of this? Why don't they have this already documented? Why isn't it written in a paper somewhere? I did this experiment, came out with these results. None of it. And this piece of shit sits there and accuses me? No, I accuse you. What do I want? I want to turn that back on.
Remember, that which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Okay, so then I am dismissing your theory because you don't have the show me 14 times the fuel, 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast. Go ahead, show me. Till then, no evidence, no belief.
It's a good thing that this is a hypothetical scenario. Anyways, that's it.
You are a lying piece of scum. That's not hypothetical. That's proven fact.
For this video. Thank you as always.
And you're just demonstrating why science sucks, because the scientists suck. They suck at doing science because they're not honest, frankly. They're just religious kooks.
Always for the view. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.
Boy, my thought is you suck. Yeah, I just go with that. God, do you suck. Yeah, you suck a lot. Squared. You suck squared. Okay, so enough of a video. Till the next time and such.